So the biggest thing with people just learning how to sandcast is understanding what works and what doesn't work. If you have something that has negative space or a recessed area, like in this picture right here, the clay, when the piece is pushed into the clay will push itself up into these areas, and then you're not going to be able to pull it back out because it's going to be stuck. So a piece has to have a way that it can release easily and not trap the clay, which you can see on this side. So let's say, a piece like a wax like this, say I carved this wax. I don't know if you can see this, but underneath it's got a lot of negative space. I can put my finger up in there. Well, it will not work. Because when you push that into your clay, the sand or clay is going to push into those negative spaces, and you're not going to be able to lift it back out. Now there are ways of doing it that'll work, like say this wax, it has a hole in it. So if I want to cast that so that hole comes out, it all depends on how I prep everything. And by using wooden dowels or graphite dowels, something that will fit into that hole, I can create a pattern, and then once I have the pattern created, a negative void for the metal to go into, I can then take the dowel and place it in here and actually pour the metal, and it will fill around that dowel. And this is a sand cast piece. It has that hole in it. But things like this are a little more advanced to understand how to prepare the flask. So we're not going to get to that quite yet, but we will eventually. You can do really cool pieces. Like this is a big copper flower I did, and it's got an area here to do some stone setting. That's pretty cool. You can do, I experiment all the time with stone in place. I carved a wax, I put the wax into the clay, and then I took a rock from my front yard, and I ended up with this piece where the metal has flowed around the edge of the stone, locking it in there permanently. This is a piece that was sand cast. It's just that it had to be done in such a way that the side holes were drilled later, the stones were set later, but it still can be sand cast if you follow some rules. So the big thing here is understanding your flask. Now the flask that I sell and that I make, it pours from the side like this. So these halves would go together, and then the metal would go down that hole and it would fill that up. There are other ones on the market where you would cut your hole in this end and the metal would go down and then it would flow out. That's another method. What I like about this is you can do both. You have the option of doing it on the side, or you have the option of casting from the ends. So you're not limited. The other great thing about this is that this particular flask is keyed together. So let me get one that's doesn't have the clay in it. So you can see when it fits, it only fits together one way. Let's see, I'm looking through the camera. But you can't twist it. Once it goes together, it only goes together one direction. And that's really good. A lot of them that you get, they twist. And you end up having to try and line it up, and that's kind of a pain, but they do work. So this one also, as you get more and more familiar, you'll discover that there are two sides to a flask. The bottom side, in sandcasting terms, is known as the drag, and that fits down. That would be the first one that goes down. You can always look for an edge, and you want that edge to face down, and then you add your clay in there. And once that has been filled, then the second half, and in sandcasting terms, this is known, let's see, as the cope. So you got the drag on the bottom, you got the cope on the top. And then they end up going together once your clay is in there, and then you end up creating your mold for the metal to be poured into. I think I have covered everything. Talc, the big thing with the talc is when you're building your mold, and we'll get to that soon, by adding a layer of talc, it keeps the two parts from sticking together and they just pop apart, and that's really important. The other thing that's really important is learning how to do the vents. If you're pouring molten metal, you get air buildup and you get gases built up. And if they don't have somewhere to go, you're not going to get your casting. So that's why we add the vents. Now, the vents don't need to be this big, maybe like a credit card thickness, but this way you can see better what I'm talking about. And the vents, they go in just the one side. My flask design has them coming out the side. Makes it very easy to do venting. But we'll also do a sand casting where it goes through the end, and I'll show you how to vent that as well. It's done a little bit different. So anyways, I think that covers everything for now. All right, thank you.